Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now 2012's Far Cry 3 remains my favourite in the series. I enjoyed the story, loved the setting, and nearly 15 years later I think it still looks good too. Of course the best way to enjoy this classic is on PC, and these days it doesn't even take a high-end system to run it at 60 frames per second or higher. I'm playing with the Ultra preset in DX11 mode using a 4GB GTX 1650, an entry-level graphics card from 2020. This is the GDDR6 version, which is slightly better than the older GDDR5 version, but performance differences will depend on the game you're playing. We're getting well over 60 FPS with very smooth performance here, and the game looks beautiful. I remember this giving my low-end setup a pretty hard time back in the day, though I was using an early AMD A4 APU with integrated graphics and getting about 15 to 20 FPS at a pretty low resolution. I ended up switching to the console version, assuming that it would run way better than anything my PC could offer, but that wasn't always the case. Far Cry 3 originally launched for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, both of which were operating on hardware designed in the mid-2000s and restricted to a measly 512 megabytes of total system memory. The resulting ports were a fascinating mix of technological triumph and absolute performance disaster. Neither console could run the game at a native 720p, the most common choice for 7th generation games. Instead, the 360 runs it at 1280 by 704, while the PS3 shaves a little more off the borders, outputting at 1274 by 702. I was going to focus on the Xbox version today, but my super cheap second-hand copy still hasn't turned up, so we'll be looking at the PlayStation 3 release. £2.50 from CEX, a whopping 50 pence more expensive than the Xbox version at the time of making this video. You really can't go wrong at this price. Or can you? Let's talk about the performance. Of course, the visually superior Classic Edition is also available for PS4 and Xbox One, which can be enjoyed on PS5 and Xbox Series consoles at 60 frames per second thanks to a recent patch. After the PC version, the Classic Edition is probably the second best way to enjoy this legendary game. But enough talk about the modern options, because today we're going to bask on the beautiful beaches of the Rook Islands at a not so beautiful frame rate. Far Cry 3 targets a standard baseline of 30 frames per second on 7th gen consoles, but in reality, meeting that target is not a common occurrence. Now usually I have a frame rate counter on screen, even for these console videos I have it on all the way through, but the adaptive VSync and massive amounts of screen tearing meant that my analysis software was getting a bit confused. I haven't made any changes to the configuration, but it did not want to count correctly, so you're only going to see a little bit of gameplay with a frame rate counter, but it should give you a good idea of how this runs. Now during casual exploration, both platforms almost manage their target frame rate of 30 FPS. However, explosions, gunplay, rapidly spreading fire, and multiple on-screen enemies all add to the performance woes. The Xbox 360 generally holds onto its frames better during active combat, though intensive gunfights still cause drops into the mid-20s or lower. The PlayStation 3 version we're looking at today has it even worse. Heavy action sequences cause the frame rate to dive deep into the low 20s, turning precise aiming into a sluggish chore. I remember watching a Digital Foundry side-by-side video back in the day where the frame rate would occasionally drop into the mid to high teens. This erratic performance, combined with a narrow fixed field of view and heavy head bobbing, is far from ideal. Back then, before I understood frame rates and frame times, I remember thinking my console was literally dying before my eyes because of the low frame rates. I thought there was some sort of major overheating issue going on. To be honest, playing this still makes me a little bit dizzy today, and I can't play it for long periods of time like I can with my other favourite games. But I persevered back then and I persevered today because for all its performance faults, it was and still is a great game. I used to spend hours travelling between radio towers, liberating outposts, doing supply drops and completing hunting missions. These mechanics were introduced with this game, taking the franchise in a totally different direction from Far Cry 2's grounded and brutal approach. It's almost as if that game wanted to kill you, but this one wants you to thrive. Far Cry 2 forced you to manage weapon degradation, clearing jammed rifles in the middle of gunfights, while constantly tracking down malaria medicine. Far Cry 3 abandoned all of that. Now, I'm not saying I didn't like Far Cry 2, far from it, I really enjoyed that, but I think the overlap of other people who thoroughly enjoyed both isn't as significant as it would be in other franchises. For example, there's going to be a lot more people that enjoy GTA Vice City and San Andreas as opposed to those who just enjoyed one or the other. But with Far Cry 2 and 3, I think you're going to find a lot of people that enjoyed one or the other. Revisiting Far Cry 3 on PS3 highlights how compelling gameplay outweighed technical limitations, at least I think it did. Of course, modern hardware offers a superior experience, but despite its compromises, I think the original vision of the Rook Islands was still brilliantly realised. It stands as a reminder that when the core gameplay loop is fun and engaging, it can completely overshadow even the most disastrous technical performance. Now, I don't think this was the worst 7th gen game in terms of performance. I was trying to look this up the other day, and I would appreciate it if you could let me know down below which were some really notable terrible games in terms of their frame rate on any console, really. I do remember this one feeling a lot different at the time, like before I really understood frame rates and frame times, and I used to play on the PS3 and 360 all the time. I got this, I put the disc in the drive, and I thought, this feels really strange. Like, why does this feel so sluggish and laggy compared to my other favourite first-person titles of the time? And looking into it now, I understand why. 30 FPS to me is acceptable if it's smooth, but in cases like this, where it wildly fluctuates, it can feel a little jarring. For the price you're going to pay for a second-hand copy these days, I honestly don't think it's that bad. I would still suggest trying to find it on PC because it's probably very cheap on a lot of sites these days, and you can probably pick up a PS4, Xbox One version for a reasonable sum, and if you have a PS5 or Xbox Series X or S, it should still hit 60 frames per second and look a lot sharper than the original release too. But let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching another PlayStation 3 retrospective. I find myself doing more of these and enjoying doing this recently, considering the PC market at the moment is, well, not what it was, let's say that. So I'll keep making PC hardware videos, of course, trying to find deals, but I'll be throwing more of these videos into the mix too, and I do hope you enjoy them. So thanks again for watching, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.